Let the sound resonate and fade away. And remember that we are the threads that weave this community together.
This is Dreaming by Robert Schumann.
Thank you, Michael. Well, good morning and welcome, members, friends, and visitors, and those of you, the crowd joining us on Zoom this morning, that's great, to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. We come together as an intentional community, gathered around our mission to support each other's individual spiritual journeys and to inspire, inform, and support all who seek a more equal and just community. We're pleased that you are with us here this morning. I'm Nancy Holland, along with Connie Schroth, service leading this morning, and we're very pleased to welcome back Leica Lewis to our pulpit. Leica uses they and she. She is they is a UU chaplain, poet, humanist theologist, and a candidate for UU ministry, having received their Masters of Divinity from the Chicago Theological Seminary last April, so congratulations. A native of the DC area, Leica has spent the last 20 years working with a variety of churches, nonprofits, and large organizations to transform conflict and to build inclusive cultures. Leica now lives in Milford, Delaware with their family, and her sermon today is a thread of shimmering darkness, and we look forward to this. We are also grateful for Michael at the piano, John, the tech guru in the back, Darlene, and all the volunteers as listed in your order of service who make today possible and every Sunday possible. We thank you all. So we have a long list of announcements this morning. One is that if you want a new picture taken for the directory, John will be taking them after service in the lounge. So please get your picture taken so we can get a new updated directory. We have quite a few new members and friends, so we want to get it updated. Also remember, this coming Friday will be a potluck here at the church, hosted by the Bealers, 6 o'clock, so hope most of you can attend. The potlucks are really fun. Next Sunday, the 19th, will be a social justice luncheon and event following the service. So they'll be discussing reproductive freedoms, and there'll be a discussion about a book that some of us here in the congregation read called the Turnaway Study, about whether women who've had abortions or were denied abortions did better or worse. It's very interesting. I also have an announcement from the Stewardship Committee. The theme for this year's campaign is Belonging Brings Us Hope. And we'd like to ponder what UUCR gives back to you. Catherine will contact you privately to chat about this. Meanwhile, mark your calendars. February 2nd is our campaign kickoff, and there will be great snacks after service to entice you to stay for the presentation by Tom of our proposed budget for the next fiscal year. We need all of you to know how to support what we do here for us and for our community, so we hope you will attend. There are also a series of announcements. I posted them on the whiteboard in the lobby. There are two announcements from the Chester Valley Ministers Association that may be of interest. The Kent Attainable Housing, which some of you are familiar with, that builds housing, affordable housing for people in the area, is hosting a workshop open to the public on setting goals and taking charge of your future. That will be January 15th, and there's more information on the board. Also, the CVMA, the Good Neighbor Fund, they're looking for shelter volunteers to staff the shelter through this month, January and February, and they're also offering a paid nighttime position. So if you're interested in that, and I think that was it. So now we'll light the chalice. The words are in your order of service. We tender this morning, opening book, turning to a page yet to be written, opening a story yet to be told. May we fill this fresh page wisely. May we write a new story into being. May we together inscribe this page with hope. And now please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 17 in the gray hymnal. Yes, and we'll sing all three verses, and Michael's going to play it through. So if you were here last Sunday, you know that I talked about how my great Aunt Mabel used to tell me tales of Greek mythology. Little did I know how well these two services were going to flow together. So when I had contacted last year about speaking here at UUCR again, she shared that she was working on this three sermon series on the fates, and asked if we'd be interested. And I said, absolutely. It sounded fascinating. And also, I really liked the idea of a little more intense, with 3 services. We get to know Leica better, she gets to know us, and we delve into this topic in a little more detail. So I'm not sure how much Leica's going to explain, but in Greek mythology, the 3 fates, or the Moirai, I had to look all these up on YouTube, were 3 sisters, Clotho, Lachesis, and Ultrapaus. And it was believed that they wove the fates of all humanity. And sometimes they were depicted as old women, old, ugly hags, and sometimes as beautiful young maidens in the arts. But and they worked together, and Clotho was the spinner, and she spun the thread of life. And our sermon this morning will be about Clotho. And Lachesis was the allotter who measured out how long the string of a person's life would be. And then Atropos was the inevitable, the one who, her symbol was pinking shears or scissors, who decided how long a person would live and cut the thread of their life. So these all bring up, obviously, fate, destiny, free will. Who weaves the patterns of our lives? So we look forward to hearing more from Leica about that today. So let's take a moment for a reflection on our stories and our lives. Those words are from Reverend Scott Tyler. He says, "Who dreamed you into being? What stories sat in their heart as they imagined what you would become? Who helped you imagine your story? Who helped you see your place in the story of the world? And maybe what matters most, who helped you understand that you could be the author of your own unfolding?" All of which is a way of asking, who listened? Who listened until you could hear yourself speak, until you trusted the voice that is your own? And now that you know what it's like to have the tale of yourself be heard into being, how might you midwife the story of another into existence? You know the kind of stories I'm talking about, those kept in cramped spaces of silence for fear of how hard and narrow this world of ours can be. Who needs your listening so their story can be set free? Whose story needs to be held in your heart so it knows it is worth entering the world? Let's just take a moment of reflection on our own stories and how we might help others bring theirs to life. May it be so. And now Connie will lead us in acknowledgements of the heart.
This is a special time we save for sharing what we hold deeply in our hearts. Be they joys or worries, we may share them here. If you are joining us by Zoom this morning, please raise your hand or unmute to share what is in your heart. Those of you who are here in person, please come to the microphone and I will light the candle for you. I will light the first candle for those already dealing with tragedy in this new year, especially in New Orleans, and I might say, especially in Los Angeles.
My daughter is a nurse at Whitsett, has been for a long time. And she was told that something had happened and she was not going to be able to drive for supposedly 2 weeks. Now, the problem is she works second shift, so she gets off at 12:30 at night. How was she going to get home? And I was telling a friend of mine about this, and this friend, Harry Hart, said, oh, that's no problem. My boys can do that. David, Brady, wherever you are, I thank you. And now the 2 weeks, of course, has gone on ad infinitum. I don't know when it's going to stop. And they're still doing that. And that amount of caring, I want to cry. I can't tell you how much it means. But it also, for me, and Julie, carries great guilt that this is going on forever. And we have tried to give them money, they won't do it. But we are carrying that guilt. But I can't tell you how much that loving kindness, that I don't know when it's going to end, goes on and on. It's a fine family, and I'm glad you're my friends.
So I always thought that I was a dog person, like for my whole life. And recently, just this summer, I went to a summer camp at an animal shelter in Georgetown, the SPCA, and I met this cat who changed my life, and now he is at home. And he is mine, and I love him so much. His name is Canada.
I'm with you too. I love cats. This is more of a general announcement, but a joy for me and I hope for others. Everyone's kind of worried about January 20th and what's going to happen. Well, we have something happening in Chestertown that will give us all a way to join together and express how we feel. So I'm going to read this. In solidarity with the National People's March being held in Washington on Saturday, January 18th, in communities all over the country, the Chestertown March will be held from 1 to 2 p.m., beginning in Memorial Park on High Street and walking down to Wilmer Park through Queen Street. I think this is the most important part. All are invited to participate in this National Day of Action to demonstrate the collective strength, the persistence of hope, and the diverse concerns of people who hold our democracy dear. The event, which is nonpartisan, is the local statement of the national undertaking to inspire energy, drive change, and defend our future. And Martin Luther King said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent and about things that matter." So I hope everybody will come.
Yeah. Thank you.
I was absolutely perceptibly touched to be able to witness on television Jimmy Carter's funeral service. I see from the nods that most people have. And being of the intellectual sort most of my life, I have not been around or been exposed to true believers. And I have not really heard too many stories of true believers other than from the Middle Ages and biblical history. But that man that we buried, that was president of this country, if the church could create more saints, he would be one, in true sense of the word. And just one thing that I didn't even know, he single-handedly appointed more women to offices in this country than all the total presidents before him. Just one little thing, but and then the other thing that really stood out in my mind that I can't really get my head around is that he truly believed everything that he preached in his form as a Sunday school teacher for 100 years. And coming back full circle, this nation, to have a man like that to lead us, is just incomprehensible in the world. And you look at the men that are leading or have led other countries that are alive today. We need to light 10 candles for this man.
Anybody else?
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. It just kills me when people even just say, oh, he was a good man, and they don't mention the wonderful things he did for our country. Tremendous things. They just gloss over that. He was a politician and a leader and so much more. And I just wanted to make mention too, we all know about the wildfires and what's going on the West Coast. We've seen that nonstop. But to see, I saw Dennis Quaid loading up the back of his truck, and I don't know Dennis Quaid, but he was one person that, I could relate to a little bit because I've seen him as an actor and whatever. And I just, I don't know how you find gratitude, which is what we're all trying to live with, when your life has crumbled and is devastated and you have nothing. And just to hold these people in our hearts, I just felt more mention should be made to that. So God bless them all.
Just to pick up on Jimmy Carter, I attended his Sunday school in August 2017. And we got there at 4 a.m. to be in line for that. And we were in the front row. So he came out, and prior to his coming out, Amy Carter's fourth grade teacher, Miss Jan, instructed us all how we should behave. And by the time Jimmy Carter came out, we were all sitting straight up in our chairs, and a friend and I were in the front row, and President Carter began to teach, and for some reason, he looked at me and he said, "What does that verse mean?" And I thought, oh my. And I responded with an answer. This is where I drew upon my upbringing in a church which taught things and from the Bible, and he seemed to be satisfied and moved on to the next point. And after Sunday school, he came up to me and he said, "Thank you for your help out there today." And I'll never forget it. And he didn't have to do that. But that was who he was. And I also was very moved by that funeral. So thank you for bringing that up.
Anyone else?
Okay, thank you.
And now, as we care for each other here today, let us also care for this church, its missions, and its programs. Please give as you are able, for our gifts keep the flame alive. Thank you. And now we're going to have a unison reading. What?
Finish the music. Let him finish the music. Oh.
Thank you, Michael. We're going to do a unison reading. It's on page 487 in your gray hymnal. Everybody read together. Okay. The bell is full of wind, though it does not ring. The bird is full of flight, thought it is still. The sky is full of clouds, though it is alone. The world is full of voice, thought no one speaks it. Everything is full of fleeing, though there are no roads. Everything is feeling toward its presence. Now we will welcome our guest for her sermon.
All right, thank you so much. It's nice to be back with you all. I see some familiar faces, and it's good to be here today. So thank you, Nancy, for introducing my sermon today. As she mentioned, we will be talking over the next 3 services, this service and 2 more, that I am with you about the fates, how the myth of the fates feeds into the weaving of time, of history, of the future, and how we are part of that weaving and creating story as well. Now, this feels particularly timely, although, of course, I didn't know when I set this what the beginning of 2025 would bring in detail. We've got a time of change, a time of threat. The new year began, of course, with an attack in New Orleans. Right now, LA is burning. We have a presidential inauguration coming up, and we don't know what the next 4 years are going to look like, but we can certainly say that they will bring challenges. So is it any wonder then that, like I saw online last week, people are saying they've tried the 2025 14-day free trial, they would not like to continue to the full subscription, they'd like their money back, please. A blanket fort, a snack stash, those sound like a pretty great plan right now, some days, perhaps today for you. And yet, if we're people who hold love at the center, if we're people who hold justice as another of our shared core values, what do we do when the state of the world, when the state of our collective demand action, and our spirits, our nerves, our exhaustion call for rest and recovery and quietness and maybe a little bit of hiding? Well, it's not an either or, it is a both and. Yes, the world needs us to take action. The world needs us to continue on into this fabric of the future that is weaving out before us. The world needs us to weave that fabric with justice at its core. And the world also needs us to do that from a place of calm, of sustainment, of being able to continue for something that is not a quick challenge that is not going to be done in a week or a month or a year or a decade, but that will stretch out for the rest of our lives and into the future. So, how do we do that? That's the challenge. How do we get more time out of the 24 hours that we have in a day? It's not cramming more and more and more in. We've tried that, right? Collectively, we've tried that. It doesn't work. It just gets us to burnout. I think the more is about quality, not quantity. What are the things that give energy to you for the work, for yourself? What brings you a feeling of expansiveness? What centers you in awe? What makes you feel a part of the world, of your part in it? What makes you feel the thread that you are in the fabric of time? Now, some people call these feelings that little or lot extra, a sparkle or a glimmer, something big or something small. But I'll ask you to just take a moment, think about it, maybe share with a neighbor if you'd like to do that. What are some of your glimmers? What are the things that make you feel a little extra spark in your heart, in your soul, in the core of your being, that gives you that little bit of energy to continue on? And don't just, if you hear someone else's shimmers, don't just recognize it, but allow yourself to feel that well up in you. So I'll give you a few moments to think and share. Right? It's a snow day for sure. Yes. Yes. Yeah, exploring with my kiddo for sure. If I could get just a few notes to call us back. Thank you so much. I love seeing you sharing and connecting. And I'll welcome you back into our group. Thank you so much, Michael. So it sounds like you have a lot of shimmers and glimmers and sparks in this room, and I love that. I have so many small and large ones exploring with my kiddo. The feel of leather binding on a book. The colors and sounds and sensations of the quiet winter, snow blanketing the ground. We have both universal and individual glimmers and sparks and moments of awe and connection into the fabric of the universe. And those many moments are what help us transcend the mundane. Now, I don't bring this up randomly, those moments of glimmers. You see, if you're not familiar with the process of spinning, I'd like to give you just a very brief tutorial in how it works, how I understand it works. I've only done just a very little bit of it myself, so I'm hardly an expert, but I know a little bit about it. So when you are spinning thread, you have to take the fibers and bring them together. So the thread starts out as these small bits. Particularly skilled spinners can spin thread, can spin yarn, can spin from just the smallest of fibers. Those of us who haven't got quite as much experience need longer fibers to work with. But whatever length of fiber you're working with, it is taking those small moments, those small glimmers, and weaving them into a larger whole. The mystic Pseudo-Dionysius wrote of where the pure, absolute, and immutable mysteries of theology were veiled in the dazzling obscurity of the secret silence, outshining all brilliance with the intensity of their darkness. I've always loved those words from Pseudo-Dionysius, because we think often of glimmers being about light, being about shining. But he speaks here of the shimmering intensity of the darkness. And we have a tendency, I think, as humans, to sometimes think in binary terms. You know, the good guys and the bad guys in old Westerns. But that's not how life works. The darkness and the light, the challenges, the triumphs, they all shimmer and glimmer with their own being. The fabric that is woven with all of our threads would not be what it was without some of the holes where threads are cut short before we would have expected them to. Without the bright moments of sudden joys and excitements. Without the quiet, subtle weavings of moments of stillness and silence. All of those of practice of creation, of, as we consider this week, weaving the threads that will make up the part of the fabric of time. Now, personally, I went through a whole swath of my life participating in contemplative practices, those practices that are supposed to help our bodies feel quiet, feel safe. I did them out of a sense of obligation. And there was another part of my life where I was so focused on doing, that I let my contemplative practices fall aside because I was too busy with everything else. Now, for me, this is partly an occupational hazard. My day job as a consultant, one of my mentors gave out the same gift to the team that her mentor had given, little like rubber ducks. And she gave them to us as a reminder that our consulting clients should only see the smooth serenity above the water and not the churning of our feet below. And I so appreciated the way that she connected with team, and also, I think that is part of the challenge that we live with, is that we try to hide the churning, that we try to only let the serenity be seen. But we need the churning and the stillness both. I don't think it's a safe practice for us to indulge the failure to recognize the churning as part of what we do together in sacredness. Choosing with intention, based on our values, with regular contemplative practices, whether those are quiet ones and still ones, whether those are busy ones, moving ones, whatever you need in that moment or in that space of your life. Those practices help us reconnect to our true inner core. That's one way that we can stay connected to this journey. That's one way that as the thread weaves or spins out rather ahead of each of us, that we can stay connected, to stay in and in our heads, to stay in the world and in the future, in the hope that we have and we create, and in the connections that we have with each other. I suspect, though, that each of you have known or been someone who had to keep moving for fear of the awareness that would sneak in once you stopped long enough to let the thoughts sneak in, thoughts come in. And that self-knowledge is a part of the transformational movement that ignites from our connection with each other, with sacred wisdom, however that exists. Now, when I was in seminary, my love of the work of Rumi inspired me to explore the Sufi teachings that grounded and buoyed his writing. I had the great joy to study with a Sufi scholar in a class of Muslim sisters. Now, our professor did not just speak about his practices from a scholarly perspective. He shared with us his own personal connection. Now, I am not the scholar that he is, and this is not going to be a lecture about Sufi practices, but I want to take some of those experiences that I had and reconnect them back to the Greek myth that we are considering. Because our personal practices, the things that give us those glimmers, not just in a moment, but that sustain us for the future, those underpin the work that we do as we spin our threads and weave them into the fabric of justice that we want to create. Now, specifically, the thing that I wanted to recollect from that Sufi practice that I studied was the importance of breath and the connection of breath to sound. And I want to take you back to a moment that I experienced when I was weaving, when I was learning to weave first. And something that you may or may not know if you've done is that weaving is very loud, especially weaving on a large loom. It's very loud. But weaving on a small loom is not. And as you go, as you find a rhythm of, and the threads and the fabric, it becomes this contemplative motion, and you get the whisper of the threads, and it becomes like breath, and the fabric begins to think itself into existence. There is a both and quality to creating what we want to see. There is a both and quality to being a part of that creating. The phrase that we use in consulting is flying, or is building the plane while we're flying it. And that is what we are doing right now in this moment in the justice work that we do. We are in the middle, flying on this blue boat home, if you will, and we don't get a chance to take and step out of the world for long enough to fix things. We are a part of the fabric even as we weave it. And so I love this idea of being a part of the song, being a part of the fabric, being a part of the world, even as we are changing the thing that we are a part of. Now, What does that mean for us in this time, in this moment, in our 21st century Unitarian Universalist context? I think we need the moments of recommitment. We need the moments of connection to our shared values, to our personal ethics. And that doesn't need to look the same for any of us. There is not a one of us who has a thread that looks exactly the same as someone else's thread. And it is the beauty and the diversity of those threads that make the fabric of time. Perhaps prayer is your way of centering, perhaps song is your way of centering, perhaps spending time in nature, or having a perfect glass of hot cider by a warm fire, a sip from a sparkling stream under the stars, though it might be a little cold to drink from streams under the stars right now. Perhaps you haven't found it yet, the practice you can undertake with intention. Perhaps you are finding it now. Or you might have many practices, depending on what most connects with you at that moment. But we are not a monastic order. We do not withdraw from the world in order to contemplate the fabric of time. We do not withdraw from the world in order to weave what we create. Our practices support us, sustain us, and center us, but they are never, ever a time of permanent retreat from the needs of an world. Perhaps my mentor didn't have it all together right. Perhaps our binary thinking about good and evil and light and dark and what we think should be in the fabric of our world. It's okay to let effort be known and our resting be known and our challenges be known and our strengths be known. If we are to weave this fabric together, if we are to spin these threads together, then we must know ourselves and each other and the world that we build together. The fabric of interdependence, the threads of love and connection carry us and our commitments into the future and within the present. As the next few weeks, the next few months, and the next few years, I hope that you will consider the sustaining practices that are a part of your things that will give you what you need to bring into this time of challenge, of hope, of creation, as we determine what we will spin and weave together. May we make it so. There's stuff there.
And now, thank you, Micah. Please rise again in body or spirit for hymn number 391 in their gray hymnal, Voice Still and Small.
Am I through it first?
Yes, please.
Voice still and strong, keeping
We have a little time if we take for discussion or comments or. Absolutely. Okay. They have something they'd like to share, comment, question?
You can say, you are on. Put your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to share something.
Someone on yes.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I think what inspired me today from what you have said is the way that I view the threads of fate and destiny. As I've aged, I've come to believe and practice much more the simultaneous awareness of our past and my past, my present involvement and activity, and the future that I imagine for myself and others.
Yeah.
And what I feel we lack most of all is being able to do this as Unitarians and Universalists. First, the past. We have a very rich, if somewhat conflicted past of the merger of Unitarianism and Universalists. And yet we know nothing about it, practically nothing. And that's very difficult because it's that past that launches us into a future. Secondly, our awareness as Unitarians and Universalists could be enriched by what other Unitarians and Universalists are doing elsewhere in the country or in the world. And we could engage with some of that, at least acquiring some knowledge of that. And the last and the third, I suppose, is destiny or the future. We all imagine a future for ourselves individually, but what is the future we imagine for ourselves collectively? And I think we need more discussion and consideration of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. There was a comment in the room as well.
Well, I'm just grateful that I think we're all on our own path, and we have the responsibility to sense what we need to keep whole. And there's so much available to us, and to as we spin our lives and our spiritual life, just to know what's going to keep us in the hard times as well as the easier ones, and whatever it is, it's there in abundance, and to keep open to it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Well, when you were talking, I was thinking about the very basis of all that we are weaving. Where do our feet stand? And what I think that is, certainly is for me, is the basis is validation of each other. People are missing that. Nothing holds together without that validation surrounding us, whether it be with a peace sign, whether it be with a smile, whether it be with, hey, stupid little stuff. It means so much to people, especially people that aren't getting it. For me, that is the basis. That is the basis. I was a parole and probation officer for years, and another agent, Vernon Metcalf, I'd see guys on probation and parole going into his office like this because they knew they were going to go back to jail. But when they came out, they were standing straight. They were standing straight. He had validated them, even though they were going to go to jail. What a wonderful person. And I try and do that. I try and do that. It is the basis. It is the basis.
Thank you for sharing.
When you talked about weaving, I remember when I was very young, and I was taking wool, raw wool, and the first thing that you have to do with wool is you have to card it. And what that means is there's two paddles that have tines on them, and you put the wool on it, and you pull these two paddles in opposite directions, and the threads get in line. They all go one direction. And it reminds me that that really is what we're about, is getting sort of in line with each other, coming from diverse backgrounds and getting in line with each other. And then the thread comes from actually spinning those into one. And that's a different analogy about not just little pieces, but the big long ones, our lives, our long lives, that have to come together and weave into one where we can take the action, which you're going to talk about in your next service.
Yes. Thank you. And that makes me think of as well something that I have not personally been a part of, and I will be honest, I'm okay with that. But people think of wool as this is like soft, fluffy stuff, but it's really, really messy, like very messy when it's coming off the sheep and getting ready even for the carding. It's a really messy process. And so, sometimes getting ready for the weaving also includes a lot of dung and mess. And so sometimes it's not as pretty as we would hope. Thank you.
Okay. Make this the last comment, but there'll be time during coffee.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to remember when we look at people, we're seeing the cloth as it is at that moment.
Yeah.
For the first part of my career, I was a death penalty attorney. And we have two phases. We have the guilt phase, and then we have the penalty phase and the guilt phase. And in the guilt phase, okay, the jury has already decided that this person has killed somebody. And we have to explain to the jury, here's why you shouldn't kill him. And so we have a practice of going up 3 generations and down 3 generations and saying the grandparent is part of the person and so is the child. And every event that took place in that person, and there are going to be threads of darkness and there are going to be threads of light. And the challenge in looking at people, and this, I had never realized it as strong as I did the first time I had to do this, was to find the parts in the worst person you've ever met that say, this person deserves at least life. And I think we so often look at people and we don't think of the warp and the weft of the cloth that came to what it is now.
Yeah. Thank you. Nancy,
Okay.
I think one more.
All right, one more.
A quick one.
It was most inspiring speech, sermon.
Thank you.
I wanted to state one thing, that Mahatma Gandhi used the spinning in the 1920s to unite whole of India, entire country, against the British, to get the freedom from the British by spinning cotton in a homemade spinning wheel. Just the sound of that spinning wheel as it was turning inspired the people. It inspired the whole nation. The problem was that the cotton we make, India makes a lot of cotton. It went to England and it was very expensive fabric was being made, which must come to India and only rich people could afford. But 99% people were very poor. They couldn't afford to buy that. So Gandhi said, we will spin our own fabric. And just the act of spinning from the cotton to the fiber, and then the fiber to the fabric, we created our own fabric from that cotton. It was called khadi. And that became a big national unification of the whole thing. In fact, Gandhi went to England to negotiate the freedom. And there was a long conference twice because the, the mills in northern England, they were against it. They wanted to export the fine fabric. But again, like you said, it was a perfect way to unite the people. And just the sound of the spinning wheel was vibrations were terrific.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Jitendra.
Thank you all.
Okay, our closing words this morning are from Reverend Bob Janice Dillon, who says that stories, paradoxically, are both a step back from our lives and a step further into our lives. In the short term, stories are an escape from our own life. But in the long term, stories provide us with meaning and context, allowing us to live more fully.
That's how we
Stories remind us that life is not just a set of problems to solve, but a meaningful tale to be read.
No.
Please enjoy the read. And now we'll extinguish the chalice. The words are in your order of service. Until we meet again.
This is the third of the Gamma Babies by F.H. Setzi.
Thank you all. Please join us for coffee and conversation.